another episode of Genre Grinder. With me today is my sort of boss, I guess, Jim Laczkowski.
I thought Tony Danza was the boss.
Yeah, no, Jim is the boss.
Okay.
Jim, we'll give him a nickname because this is a techno-related episode, so he's Jimbo the Laser for this episode.
That works for me.
Laser Laczkowski. Yes, so it was Jim's idea to do an episode on Techno Horror, which is a really cool subject that I already was very fond of. And as usually happens, when I tried to make a list of that genre, I realized there was like 7,000 movies. So I kept on trimming it down, and it got to the point where we were getting close to recording time, and I made the executive decision to make it. This one's just for for evil or possessed video games, computers, or internet. So no evil televisions, no evil telephones, no haunted VCRs, no haunted DVD players, no haunted, home appliances. Though that's going to come up anyway.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, I think, I was thinking of even something like you could probably save that content for an episode in which we can talk remote control. Because I kind of like that movie.
Remote control and terror vision.
Sure.
There's some good cheesy evil TV. There's a movie called The Video Dead that is quite literally about of somebody gets a TV that will only play one movie, and it's about zombies, and the zombies eventually crawl out of the TV.
Yeah. Well, this topic came to mind mainly because I've kind of always grown up with a computer in my home, and my dad was huge into technology. I think we got a Commodore 64 when I was like 6. And then I really just got into movies, not necessarily horror, but war games, Last Starfighter, Daryl. Mm-hmm. And, I think I watched those over and over again as a kid. Like they were just, they were kind of about technology to some degree, but very focused on computer games in some capacity. But there's some interesting ones.
I bet you and I are the only two people who have seen Daryl more than once.
Yeah.
That seems like one that kind of went under the radar there. But I watched that movie more than I ever watched War Games or Last Starfighter when I was a kid.
Yeah, I feel like that one was on HBO a lot, or one of those.
It must
channels.
have been, or even USA or
Sure.
TNT or something. Yeah.
Yeah, he wins pole position at one point.
Yeah.
that's classic moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's definitely some bad ones out there. Like I know I've seen Brain Scan. I didn't get to rewatch it, but those are kind of like there's obviously ones that you mentioned too about like virtual reality going awry, and as I've become more of a horror fiend over time, I definitely gravitate towards films where machines are out of control in some capacity.
Yeah, and I figured we should save like actual evil robots for their own thing, because that's like a whole nother the whole nother genre of itself is robots that are evil. Like what we've made with this list and the movies we're going to cover is less about like self-awareness in machines like apocalyptic self-awareness in machines, and more like the idea of computers housing malevolent forces, basically.
Yeah.
And I didn't actually
like
even plan it that way when we decided which ones we were going to talk about, but it kind of is the unifying element here.
Does it all go back to 2001: A Space Odyssey with Hal?
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is I think that the idea of self-aware computers killing us all is much scarier than computers with ghosts in them killing us all.
Very true.
So I made the rules about the computer thing, and then because I specifically wanted to talk about one movie, I basically almost broke the rules immediately. Because the first thing we're going to talk about is 1983's Death Spa, which is technically a haunted computer movie that is masquerading as a haunted spa movie. And when we say spa, in this case, this is the 80s usage of spa, which really means
gym.
Yeah. It's the place where you would go to do your aerobic exercises and maybe work out. These days when we say spa, we usually mean a place you go to get massaged and a facial and and a haircut.
Death Spa. Welcome to the health club where you'll sweat blood.
Never work without a spotter, Freddie. Weight falls on your chest and you can really get squashed.
It's the place for a killer workout. An unquiet spirit reaches out from beyond the grave.
Welcome to my party.
For revenge.
I will destroy this place, and I'll kill them all. Unless you do as I say.
Death Spa. An exercise in terror.
A fantastic weight reduction program. People get so thin they disappear.
Yeah, I gotta say that a simple Google search led me to this AV Club article that simply said, Gore Verbinski is making a movie about a killer spa, and I got so excited at the thought, is he doing a remake? Is that what this is? Oh God, oh my God, I'm so excited this is going to be remade. It turns out it was just about a cure for wellness, which I've yet to see. You know, and
it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely about the wellness spa rather than the workout spa.
I see.
Yeah, I would consider that movie almost it's really a gothic romance horror movie in a lot of ways. But this one is not as little gothic or romantic about Death Spa. It's directed by Michael Fischa, Fischa. He didn't do much else.
No.
And it was actually filmed in 83, but it didn't get released until almost the end of the, I think 89 or 88 is when the VHS finally came out. It's basically a time capsule for this very brief period between like 1982 and 1985, where everything had this neon poppy, they call it the Memphis group, pastel decorative motifs. That's the name of the thing when you think of the Saved by the Bell logo.
Oh, okay.
Or
Yeah,
the thing
yeah.
in the background during Nicktoons. That's called the Memphis group style. And everybody has big hair. Everybody has high-waisted one-piece bathing suits stretched over neon spandex. The movie is so entrenched in this era that a character turns down an unwelcome sexual advance by saying, I'm a beta, you're a VHS.
Oh God, I love that line.
I mean, that line makes no sense to a lot of people today.
Well, now we would say what, like I'm 4K and you're DVD?
I mean, even then, I mean, do people these days really care about that kind of stuff? I mean, like they cared about beta and VHS? I don't think the HD DVD and Blu-ray stuff was even as big a deal.
Nah.
Like you and I are old enough. I'm old enough to remember I'd walk up to a video store and I'd hand my mother something, and she'd say, "You got to put it back. That's a beta. We can't watch it."
Yeah, no, I remember that for sure.
It sucked.
No, but my dad, of course, got a beta player because he.
Well, they were the superior. It was the superior format.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. He had to have Top Gun in beta, because and hook it up to the stereo. But no, this is exactly the kind of movie I grew up renting, with my friends for a sleepover party. Something like Blood Diner, where it mixes in the humor with the horrific, and it's just essentially just a bunch of great kills and set pieces in a confined setting. And the automated computer system, it's funny because I initially thought of Gremlins 2, because that's that they pretty much have like an entire building that's run by an automated computer system that eventually goes awry thanks to the Gremlins. But no, I mean, this is just a lot of fun. Really, this whole movie is just a wild trip, and it gets really gory and gross. And I actually felt bad because, Patrick's doing that. He's been doing that fundraiser thing over on Letterboxd, and somebody suggested to him for the fundraiser to watch and review Killer Workout, and I was like, oh, why didn't they say Death Spa? That's so much more fun.
It is. Killer Workout's a bit of a bummer. There was a sort of short-lived. You got Killer Workout. the original Toxic Avenger is sort of a, and actually I'll have to give Toxic Avenger has the scene where the guy gets his head crushed by the weightlifting machine.
Yes.
That's like the primo 80s health club gym kill of all time, but that movie's not as good as this movie. There's also the thing in Nightmare on Elm Street 4 with the working out, and it turns into a roach motel.
Oh yeah, that's good.
But I believe this and Killer Workout would be like the two standout.
Yeah, so this jilted lover that essentially is a ghost. She possesses the computer guy, her twin brother. I'm guessing that's how this plays out, and
yes,
it gets really really weird because I feel like, because at first they're all talking about, well, this computer system is flawed and clearly it's causing all these terrible things to happen. But I was like, how the heck does a computer hook up to a diving board and loosen the screws? That doesn't make sense.
Well, it doesn't have any internal logic. It starts out with it starts out like a movie where there's a computer system that's going amok, and it's like there's a guy trying to do weightlifting, and the computer manages to pull his arm back so far that his ribs kind of poke out. Woohoo. And he dies, which is probably the best kill in this movie.
Yeah.
But it's really, it's revealed that it's actually a ghost is both possessing her brother. This woman who's died is both possessing her twin brother, who is more or less a red herring the whole movie, that the idea that he is doing this on purpose, that he's somehow sabotaging things, even though the movie gives away way too early that he is not, and that it is a ghost entity, because the ghost can possess, there's no internal logic, the ghost can possess all the computer equipment, but it can also, unscrew the bolts on a diving board, change the chemical mixture of what's coming out of the, what do you call them? The sprinkler system.
Right.
I think the idea is that there's supposed to be chlorine in it, but that wouldn't really work. But it turns the sprinklers system into acid, basically. Just stuff that just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But it is an evil computer movie, and it has wonderful nonsense computer lingo. That and one of the highlights of the whole movie is that the brother, as we're talking about, is played by an actor who's having a good time.
Yes.
With what he's doing, and it's his name is Merritt Buttrick, and
yes,
you probably know him as Captain Kirk's son in Wrath of Khan and Search for Spock, the curly hair. And he made this. This was one of his last movies, one of his final performances.
Yeah, it was. I think his last film.
He it actually was released after he died. He died of complications from AIDS. I think that he was enjoying the fact that he was allowed to be campy in this part. It's a little. It's probably not the healthiest representation of a trans stuff, because he kind of gets possessed by his sister, and so there's like sort of a cross-dressing element, but then some people see him as him in his sister's clothes, and other people see it as his actual sister.
Right.
That part's not exactly progressive, but it was nice to see a openly gay actor get to play a gay character, more or less. And have fun with it, kind of doing a whole Vincent Price thing with the role he had.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I still don't quite understand even, I guess the, her ghost can reanimate dead fish later in the film.
That's where it gets absolutely ridiculous, is that, all these kinds of movies, it's a little bit like a Final Destination movie.
Yeah. A lot of these are, actually.
Yeah, that will come up again. Where things are happening to people, so it's like the structure of a slasher movie, except for I suppose they probably had The Omen in mind, because The Omen has a lot of sort of accidental deaths that aren't accidents, but it's stuff like that where something will happen and people won't understand how it's possible this thing happened. And during the big climax, which includes a woman getting her hand stuck in a blender that won't turn off, that goes on forever. The man who's trying to help her is basically attacked by frozen swordfish that just levitate and actually they're not even swordfish, they're just frozen fish.
Yeah.
That levitate and just mangle him because there is a sushi chef on staff, and sushi was also just becoming a really big deal for yuppie culture at this time. It just throws everything out the window at the end. It's very odd the entire time, and it has all these subplots that are each their own little trope in themselves, like the jilted ghost lover who is trying to possess someone to kill the new lover of the man that she doesn't, that she feels ditched her. And I guess I can't really recall if she actually does commit suicide, she self-immolates, or if there's
I think so. That was kind of implied. I think
okay.
so.
It's implied that she did it on purpose. So there's that whole thing going on. There's this whole thing about industrial sabotage. Despite the fact that there's a questionable character in charge of this computer and a ghost, there's also two people that are purposefully sabotaging things and causing accidents. There's this like romantic subplots, and poor Ken Foree.
He's kind of lost in the shuffle, but I mean when he shows
and he'll
up,
disappear, and at the end he literally runs in the room to save the day after having not been in the movie for a solid 10 minutes or something like that. You get the feeling he was a little out of their pay range, I guess, and so they only had him for a couple days, but he's always great.
Of course.
And you have Rosalind Cash and Frances McCarthy as the two cops that are investigating this. And it keeps threatening to turn into their movie, like a cop movie about these mysterious supernatural murders.
Yeah, it's always cutting away to them.
Periods of time.
Yeah, it's cutting away to them, like trying to figure out, oh, I don't know, was this guy the perpetrator? What do you think is going on? And it's like, you probably could have cut some things out here and there, and maybe a subplot, but I don't know. I find it consistently enjoyable. I think it's not perfect. It's kind of a mess, but I still find it a lot of fun. And again, it's one of those movies that I think that had I discovered it a lot sooner with my friends, we would have had a ball with it.
There's something to be said for how visually appealing it is. It's really well photographed, and in fact, the opening that has the Death Spa logo was shot using a crane and a Steadicam, and they got the Steadicam operator was actually the number one Steadicam operator. She was the wife of the guy who invented the Steadicam. So they put effort into certain things. It's clear that their sets are small, and they're really using like the lobby of a building to look like a gym for most of the workout scenes, but it's so well lit and so loudly decorated that you don't really notice how shallow the set itself is.
Yeah, I think it was a dance studio that they just
it was probably my assumption is it's a dance studio for the dance scenes, which are just very, very over the top in their sexuality, and then they turned that dance studio's lobby into a couple little machines that are plugged into the wall, like a couple little workout machines. It's also, it should be said that this movie was particularly gory.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It was cut pretty hard for its little tiny theatrical release for an R rating. But the version that most of us have seen is the uncut version. It was one of the few at the time. You usually would have either movies without, in the VHS days, you'd have movies that were the R-rated version that was out in theaters, or you would have a movie that was from another country or so low budget that it didn't get rated anyway. Very seldom did you have the unrated cut of a movie that was otherwise presented with an R-rated. This one and Hellraiser 2 are two of the only ones I remember really seeing back in the day, and they were both released around the same time on video, if I remember right. Hiya, gang. After we recorded this, I remembered that The Reanimator was famously presented in both R-rated and unrated forms on VHS. That was one of the really early ones, even before this. Okay, bye. These days, the unrated cut is a selling point. It's actually been that way for almost 2 decades now. The degree of violence, the acid spraying ceiling sprinkler is genuinely icky. Like this woman is reduced to goo and she's still alive.
Right.
That's a real good nasty moment.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of, when somebody's just trapped and they can't leave a certain space.
I'm always freaked out by people who are just mangled beyond any possibility of recovery but are still alive. That's always something that gets to me. There's the scene in The Fly 2, which is mostly not a good movie, but the fly barfs on a guy's face and he peels off his own face and he's still screaming. He's still alive without a face. That's way worse than the fly barfing on his face and him dropping over dead, or this woman getting acid sprinklers and dropping over dead. No, instead she gets acid sprinklers and just continues living, even though she's mostly just green and red stuff. And
yuck.
Another little fun factoid about, well, I should say Michael Fischa made My Mom's a Werewolf and Anthony Edwards' cop movie called Delta Heat that I have otherwise never heard of.
Whoa. Huh.
That's really it for him. I assume that My Mom's a Werewolf is kind of on par with this one. I never saw that one. I thought I had seen it and I realized I had seen My Boyfriend's a Vampire.
It's easy to get them mixed up.
Yeah. But the producer, Walter Shessen, is the guy who made Hard Day's Night and Help.
Wow. So he got the money for that.
A lot of money.
Wow.
And that's why Help is actually playing on the TV in one scene, because they didn't
that's
have to pay
right.
anything
Yeah,
for it.
yeah.
So this was produced by a pretty big deal producer on a small budget by an independent studio.
Very
And then
interesting.
the other producer, the woman, is actually a character with a couple lines. She's one of the people you keep seeing working out. And I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah, the Blu-ray was from this. It was going to be this whole new release of Gorgon, which was a big deal in the VHS days. Gorgon would have these really big boxes and really decorative cover art. And Gorgon was trying to make a comeback on Blu-ray, and I believe this is the only thing they ever put out was Death Spa. I think they just stopped right after that, which is nice because I wanted Death Spa in high definition to see all those beautiful colors, but unfortunately, I don't think they've released anything else since. Hey, me again. I just looked it up while I was editing this, and I forgot they had Gorgon had released Faces of Death on Blu-ray first, and then there was kind of a lull, and then they released this, and apparently since then they've released a double feature of Bonnie's Kids and the Centerfold Girls. I also noticed that Death Spa on Blu-ray is on sale for only $15 on their website as of this recording, so I don't know. Maybe you should get on that. It's pretty good. But the Blu-ray is worth it. If this sounds at all interesting to you, listener, the Blu-ray has like an hour-and-a-half long documentary about the making of
No
the film.
kidding. Wow.
Yeah,
I'll have to pick that up
pretty
then.
good.
That's cool.
It's worth the price. It's got a commentary too. It's good fun. So yeah, this is a great movie. I love it. This is like, I don't believe in guilty pleasures, but if someone forced me to make a guilty pleasure list of movies that I understand are limited in their quality, but I still enjoy, this would be very high on that list.
Yeah, something again like this and Blood Diner, I think would qualify. They're just you know that they're ridiculous and they don't make a lick of sense, but you go with it because it's just got the right pacing, the right tone, and yeah, it does look great. I think just watching it in HD on Amazon, I was like, man, this movie looks really good.
Yeah, it does. So we'll move on now to the second movie, which neither of us had seen before this, which is 1993's Arcade.
Oh boy.
At Dante's Inferno, the ultimate video game has come to life.
This is Arcade, and it's all done in virtual reality. It's so real, you'll actually think that you're in the game board.
I am Arcade. If you want to play games, you picked the wrong machine.
You gotta try this thing.
And all you need to play are 2 quarters and your soul.
I think the game is alive somehow.
If you won't play the game by my rules, then I'll play in your world.
Now, 2 teenagers will play for their lives.
Kiss reality goodbye forever.
And enter an electronic world where virtual reality has become flesh and blood.
Congratulations, Alex. You've almost made it to the final level.
Arcade. Kiss reality goodbye.
So this is a full moon movie. Directed by Albert Pyun, I think is how you say his name. I'm not positive. It's Pyun. I think it's Pyun. He basically made Kickboxer sequels, and he did Doll Man for Full Moon. He did the famous straight-to-video Captain America movie from the 90s, around the time this was released, actually. He did the Sword and the Sorcerer early in his career, which is actually pretty good. But I think the best movies he made were Nemesis and Omega Doom, which are just sort of straight-to-video sci-fi movies that were just a step above most straight-to-video sci-fi movies at the time. This is not his best work.
No, and I can't get over the fact that this was an early script from David S. Goyer.
Yeah, well,
I was like, wow.
I always think David Goyer's name on something is a sign that he had a good idea but didn't necessarily write a good script, because I feel like the Blade movies and the Dark Knight movies were pretty extensively rewritten by their directors. And I think Goyer really is good with concepts. Like the fact that he knew that they can make a movie out of Blade at a time when superhero movies weren't big means that David Goyer deserves a lot of credit in the world. But
yeah,
I don't think he's ever solo written a good movie. He's definitely never directed a good movie. I can say that much for sure. But this was on the verge of him being a big name. This is not 93 is when Blade came out in 95, I believe.
Yeah,
So
I think you're right. Around that time,
yeah, he was about to become a pretty big name guy who people started to go to for genre and comic book movies. Kind of just before the Marvel stuff happened, when it was still that Batman was your big money maker.
Right. No, I was actually kind of looking forward to this because I thought, well, maybe this will be like a vaporwave version of Existence or something.
It's sort of what the trailer looks like.
Yeah, but I'm going to quote Patrick Bromley from F This Movie because he kind of summed this one up pretty nicely without like completely trashing it either. He just says that if the cast of Beverly Hills 90210 was thrown into the world of Tron, it would look a lot like 1993's Arcade.
See, that makes it sound better than it is, though.
Well, I'm not a big fan of Tron. I mean,
No, I'm not either, but at least Tron... At least Tron has stuff going on. Tron is kind of boring.
It is, surprisingly, yeah. When I saw it on the big screen within the past year, I just went, I don't know why this has a cult following behind it, but I mean, it was groundbreaking for its time. I recognize that, but...
Yeah, but no, we don't have to pretend Tron's a good movie. I don't think we're going to hurt any feelings.
No, but the major upside for me, though, I mean, I do kind of like Megan Ward because I just think she's very likable. Going back to my love of her in one of the better, sillier Amityville sequels, It's About Time. She's pretty memorable in that.
I don't know if I've seen About Time.
It's one of the better ones. It's like I haven't seen all of them, but for some reason that one kept coming up as, pretty decent. I think it was one of those made for cable things, but
probably.
But it actually wasn't bad for an Amityville movie.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've only ever really enjoyed Amityville 2.
Sure.
But that's just because it's a Italian horror movie in disguise.
Yes.
It was directed and produced by Italians trying to make Amityville meets Evil Dead. Anyway, beside the point. But yeah, the cast in this is good.
Sure.
And super wasted. So Megan Ward, who was already working a lot of full moon movies at the time. There's the secondary lead is Peter Billingsley, who was the boy in Christmas Story. And I've spent a lot of the movie going, why does this guy look so familiar? And as soon as I realized he was the boy from Christmas Story, I realized, oh my God, he looks exactly the same, even as a young adult. Like his face didn't really change.
Not at all. Yeah. Like almost like Fred Savage.
Yeah, it was a Fred Savage case where the body proportions just changed, but not the face. John Delancey plays the executive in charge of the selling game. This is around the time he would have started being Q.
Yeah.
This is just a little bit after that, so it wasn't like he was a nobody. And you've got Seth Green, who is in a small role as one of the friends. AJ Langer, who was the girl in The People Under the Stairs.
Oh, that's right. And she was also on My So-Called Life. Really good in that
My
show.
So-Called Life, which so we got a pretty big cult following in the cast. And they aren't bad, but you get the feeling they're basically making up their lines as they go along. Like it's one of those bad horror movies where everything between the parts they've spent money and planning on is absolutely filler, and you're just waiting for the next thing to happen.
Yeah, that's the case for some of these movies, is that you have to sit through some pretty bad acting and dialogue to get to something interesting, hopefully around the horizon. But at the same time, like, I mean, I wasn't expecting groundbreaking special effects or anything, but it's mostly just a green screen messy version of VR that kind of makes like Lawnmower Man look like Citizen Kane. I just
and part of the reason I wanted to watch this is because I think Lawnmower Man is just brutally boring, so I thought this sort of cheapo equivalent would be fun, but it's actually more boring, maybe.
Yeah. No, I mean,
and it's not even. They don't even earn the R rating. I was at least hoping it was a full moon movie. There'd be a couple gory scenes, but
I hadn't realized this was R. I wouldn't have
think
thought
it's because they say fuck a couple times.
Yeah,
that's the
I
only
guess
thing
so.
I could get out of it. And like a lot of bad movies, the behind the scenes story is a little bit interesting, and that it was originally going to be released in '91, but it got pushed back to '92, and then pushed back again to '93, and then pushed back again to '94. And the true reason this happened is because they originally did CG effects that were a flat ripoff of Tron.
Oh my gosh.
Including sky cycles and stuff. And Disney threatened to sue them. And so there was a trailer released. And in fact, I couldn't find it myself, but it was apparently said that YouTube used to have this original Tron cut with the different special effects. I could not find it, unfortunately. All I could do was find the trailers and compare some shots. And yes, it does look... It was not, I wouldn't guess better, but it was at least a little bit more interesting. They had to replace all their special effects, and they ended up with something really dull instead.
Yeah. I think even Peter Billingsley helped out with doing the film's effects, which I read about, and I was like, that's wild. I had no idea. But he sort of went on to just produce. I think he became buddies with like Jon Favreau.
So this movie was held back and then finally released, and so we got to give it a little credit for they had to redo everything.
Sure.
And apparently it ended up recut. The thing that they also put some money into the effects. They are bad, but you have to keep in mind this was being made around the same time that Jurassic Park was being made for like 7 times the money or more, and with brand new state of the art stuff. They just didn't have anything they could do with it. Basically you could make video games with it is what you could do at the time. So they just sort of like the big problem is that people don't really actually interact with the game itself for most of the movie. Probably because they had to cut out all the Tron stuff at the very end. There's sort of like Spy Kids 3D at the very end, where they're kind of wandering around the video game.
Right. They finally get to it. It builds up to it. Yeah.
Right. And one other thing they do that's a bad idea is they're trying to turn Arcade, which is the name of the entity within this game, into a Freddy Krueger type.
Oh boy.
And it even to the point where he has a tragic backstory where it turns out he's like a very angry orphan child.
Of course he's got trauma. Of course, you know?
Which reminded me, there's a Venture Brothers episode where it turns out Dr. Venture had used the soul of a child to make a invention and it has to be exercised. And I can't imagine that the creators of Venture Brothers saw this movie. I think that is just one of those fun coincidences that a satirical thing and a serious thing came up with the same solution to a writing problem.
Yeah. I mean, it gives Megan Ward's character, they try at least to give her some sort of, complex history with having a mother that committed suicide. Again, more suicide. She has a nightmare at one point, and I kind of went, oh, you guys are trying to get us to really care about her, and she does her best, but it's just, and man, it's got such a clunker of an ending, I gotta say. And then clearly they wanted to set it up for a sequel if this thing were to take off, but
yes.
Ugh.
Basically every single Full Moon movie at this point is set up for a sequel. They had already released like 8 Puppet Masters by now, probably only 4, but still, they definitely wanted sequels. Excuse me. It's also funny that the evil game is just called Arcade.
Yeah.
When the arcade where the game is actually located is called Dante's Inferno, which is a much cooler name for an evil arcade game.
Absolutely.
And they send it home with people, and so you think there's going to be more of a home arcade thing, but it really never materializes. The arcade entity kind of traps people mentally or emotionally or something within itself, and but it doesn't really make any sense, and it doesn't really do more than quip and threaten to do things, and then eventually trap somebody. And well, the thing you're talking about, that the suicidal mother thing, I thought that was interesting, that there's like this older teenage girl who's basically taking care of her single father,
yes.
Widower father. And it just dawned on me that kind of was the single parent thing and single father thing was really common at the time in horror movies in particular. And I just imagine it has something to do with E.T. I don't know exactly, but it made me think of Scream, where the mother has died under tragic circumstances and she's basically taking care of her father. I just thought that was a weird trope to pop up.
I don't know why they didn't go with Dante's Inferno, though. I mean, it's like you could have named the villain Dante, and he could have been like, "Welcome to my Inferno, bitch." There you go. Yeah, it's perfect.
But it's arcade.
Yeah,
it's very disappointing.
Yeah, you can tell they wanted him to be Freddy Krueger because they refer to Ward as bitch a few times.
Every 5 seconds. Yeah, I mean, everybody wanted, by 1991 when this was being made, everybody wanted their own Freddy Krueger. It was like an arms race to get the next Freddy Krueger. They'd given up on being the next Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees. They all wanted to be the next Freddy Krueger.
A Nightmare on Tron Street. No, didn't quite work, guys. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, that's a good idea.
Sure.
But no. They're just funny little things, too, where having... this would have been taking place in 91. I would have been going to a lot of arcades in 1991, and I can tell you for a fact that game would not have cost 50 cents. That game would have at least been $1, probably more. Usually the games you could sit in were very expensive.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah.
Do you remember there was a holographic fighting game called Time Traveler?
Whoa. How would I not play that one?
It was basically a thing you looked down on, and it worked with mirrors. And so there would be little men who looked like they were holograms standing up. It cost like $3 or $4 or $5 to play, and it was effectively unplayable. It was like what's it called? Space Ace and Dragon's. What was it called? Dragon's Lair.
Yeah.
Those games that weren't really games, they were like reaction simulators.
Yeah, I feel like at the beginning of Big, isn't Tom Hanks's, or the little boy, isn't he playing like one of those kind of?
Well, at least his thing is asking him questions that he can answer. Like these were like just impossible games where you were expected to move a lever at the right time. But they were cool little hologram guys. But anyway, games were very expensive, even in the 90s. And then they go through this effort of putting the Alex character. She takes home the home version and she puts on what I would call a pretty realistic VR headset and gloves.
Oh, right.
Because the technology did exist at the time, and they were trying to introduce that to arcades, which we'll get into in a second when we talk about the next movie. But then she uses a joystick while wearing the gloves. I thought that was hilarious.
Sorry, maybe she wasn't using the power glove.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The whole point is that you used your hands, and that's why the gloves had all the crap on them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just this is just dull, not good. The photography is pretty nice, I suppose, and the cast does their best.
Sure. Yeah, it's a likable cast for sure.
This was actually the second full moon video game movie, and I had already seen the first one, which is called The Dungeon Master. And so I decided to pick the one I hadn't seen, and I wish we would have picked The Dungeon Master, which so you haven't seen, but it's basically it's Tron without trying to do digital effects. It's a guy gets sucked into it's an anthology movie where a guy gets sucked into like different levels in a game. And
that sounds fun.
Richard Mall, is that his name? The big guy?
Yeah.
He plays this wizard, the Dungeon Master, who keeps sending the guy off to different, I think it might be Steve Railsback, to different places to fight like rock creatures and shit like that. It's a much more entertaining film. So if you're looking for a full moon movie about people getting stuck in video games, look for The Dungeon Master from 1983, not Arcade from 1993.
Yeah, this one does sound like a lot of fun. I'll definitely add it to my list.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any more thoughts on this one?
Not so much. I was hoping for more, and was terribly disappointed by it. I think really the cast and just the good intentions make it at least watchable, but you're gonna be pretty bored.
Yeah, unfortunately. The idea of evil inside computers was apparently a really big deal for a little bit in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Because you had Arcade, then you had the next one we were going to talk about, Ghost in the Machine. They're both released in 93. Brain Scan was released the next year. Lawnmower Man was released the year before that. Virtuosity, which sort of counts.
Oh, man, I saw Virtuosity in the theater.
Yeah, that was 1995.
Yeah.
It's not technically a video game, but it's similar to this. It's sort of an evil internet entity. And it is interesting because it's sort of like in the late 80s, you had movies like Wes Craven's Shocker, The Horror Show, and Destroyer, which were all movies about serial killers who were sent to the electric chair and ended up becoming electronically enhanced ghosts that can like jump from socket to socket.
Man, if you want to do a whole episode on those, I'm down.
Oh yeah, it's a great three-fer.
Yeah, there's even like the idea of body switching movies. I feel like The Hidden kicked that off too, with just the idea of an
like
alien jumping from body to body.
Virtuosity, and there's a different one with Denzel Washington called Fallen.
Right.
It's
yes.
Almost the exact same thing, but I think an evil ghost in that case. Anyway, it's just interesting that all these movies are coming out around the same time, and then it just dies. You just don't. You go back. I mean, maybe The Matrix killed it. The Matrix sent us back to like the Terminator idea of self-aware computers rather than evil entities within computers.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what happened. But so we decided on Ghost in the Machine. I was originally going to try to make us watch Fear.com, but did not. I was unable to find a copy.
Yeah, I think the only way Patrick got it was through eBay. So
yeah, and that's just not worth it.
No.
So Ghost in the Machine was pretty easy to find. And I remember really loving the trailers for this when I was a kid.
Same.
Or I guess it's tween. And it's starring, well, it's mostly starring...
Karen Allen.
Last night, a killer died.
Where the hell did that go?
His body was laid to rest. But his soul...
That's impossible.
...has come online.
This is gonna be fun, Terry.
Who is this?
I'm killing your friends.
Looked like there was someone else in there with us.
The killer died in this hospital. And it was plugged into your computer. Something is coming after my son and my friends.
There's no way anyone can kill somebody with a computer.
Shred him.
The board is up. He's not in the computer.
You can't run, you can't hide, you can't win.
Ghost in the machine. Plug in to your worst nightmare.
Had a crush on Karen Allen, not from Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was actually first time I saw Starman.
Absolutely. I'm 100% agree with you. I
Yeah.
remember seeing that movie kind of going, you know what would be really cool is if I like when I was younger, obviously when I first saw it in the theater, it wasn't necessarily like I find her attractive, but I thought, wouldn't it be cool if these were my godparents? Karen Allen and Jeff Bridges. They just seem like the coolest people to hang out with.
Yeah, I definitely got to. I think I didn't see it until I was older on video, and so I definitely was. Oh my God, this is the most beautiful woman alive.
You got to see Colwell if you haven't, because
no, I have not.
That's like that was last year, and boy, oh boy, does she knock it out of the park with an incredible performance. It's like a Kelly Reichardt film. It's very slow and subdued and low key. It's like 70 minutes long, but it's just a really good character study, and she is phenomenal in it.
It's interesting that she was in. I mean, Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's hard to call it a cult movie. It is a cult movie technically. And Starman, just massive cult movies, and she's in both of them, and she's great in both of them. But her career wasn't huge.
Surprising, yeah.
I don't know if that was. It might have just been her choice. I never really looked into it. This was directed by Rachel Talalay,
who I'm a fan of. I gotta say, I'll get behind at least some of Freddy's Dead, and especially Tank Girl. So that's another reason.
Well, I
why
think
I was
Tank
excited.
Girl is actually a good movie.
Yeah.
I think this and Freddy's Dead. She actually worked at New Line for a long time, and is considered the mother of Freddy in a lot of ways because she helped propel the series along when it was. It's just a lot about her if you watch the Never Sleep Again documentary.
Yes, for sure.
She was very important. But this movie is like Freddy's Dead in that I don't think it's very good, but there are scenes that are good, and it's directed with a kind of energy that I always really like.
Yeah, and I think from this day forward, whenever I get a CAT scan, I'm going to be thinking of this movie too.
That's true.
It's just funny because I'm like, okay, I love a ridiculous premise. I can get behind the idea of a serial killer, dying during a thunderstorm and his soul seeps into the CAT scan machine, into the mainframe computer somehow. I don't know. Like those ideas are obviously ridiculous, but they put a smile to my face. But at the same time, like I completely forgot about the address book killer angle, and he is just so lame. At least Horace Pinker from Shocker had some personality, but this guy is just like, hanging out at the computer store and being a creepy stalker dude and just like looking for address books, and that's his method. But like, I don't know, even before he becomes this, evil sentient creature being going around and messing things up via computer, I didn't care. I didn't find him interesting at all, and certainly the kid isn't good in this.
No, we can talk about the kid in a minute,
Yeah.
but I do want to say that I think one of the weirdest choices this movie makes is to make her, the Karen Allen character, just his next victim before he dies. And so there's no connection between them. She's just the person whose address book he happened to pick up last before he died. That it would have been much more interesting to have a first act where she somehow thwarts his assassination attempt instead of him just getting into a random car accident.
Yeah, that was so silly.
If instead she was being kidnapped and caused the car accident, and so then he's trying to get his revenge on her. There's just no connection between him and any other characters. He's just this thing like Freddy Krueger has a connection to all the parents of the children he's attacking. It gives you something. There's some sort of, and then you have sequels where there'll be vengeance and this character will come back and Freddy will attack them, blah blah blah. There's nothing to connect them, so there's no reason to be interested in their dynamic. Like, it's almost like when you have a romantic couple with no chemistry. In this case, you have antagonist and protagonist that have no chemistry.
Yeah, no, that's true. I found myself laughing so hard during his car accident. He just starts laughing as he knows he's about to get hit or something, or like he's driving along and almost hits a tree or whatever, and he's just like laughing knowing that he's about to die, I guess, because maybe in his head he goes, oh, now I can finally do what I really want to do and become a computer killer or whatever.
Yeah, become a ghost.
Yeah.
I'll say that is the choice to have him go into a CT scanner. And it's funny, we're talking about this. I just had a PET scan earlier today. I didn't even put that together. But he gets sucked into a CT scanner. And so his actual ghostly, so they don't have, this is another 93 movie made for a much lower budget than Jurassic Park. So they don't have a lot of technology at their disposal. So his ghostly form is actually in the layers. Like, it might, for all we know, be the actor's actual CT scan, which is visually interesting to see the layers come out of that. It's a good way to do it, to save yourself money from having to actually render a CG ghost, I guess. Visually, this movie makes a lot of good choices, I think.
Oh yeah, I think it's really good, and in that regard, I think it's just not the greatest script, and the lead kid is just a D-bag, especially the way he's acting towards the babysitter. I'm like, oh God. I mean, I know I was a teenager too, but at the same time, he's just being creepy and weird.
I am a little bit disappointed in Talalay being a female director and making making a movie that actually has scummier male gaze stuff than than a lot of the male movies. But yeah, there's a whole thing where this boy who is just the most obnoxious actor, he was in Sandlot the year before this came out. I don't know much else about him. Basically, he's adopted everything about hip hop that was cool in the early 90s. So like, he's trying to so there's a scene that could be cute where he's trying to impress the babysitter who's much older than him by sagging his pants, which was a pretty new thing at the time, and totally fails because his mom comes and is a mom, and it's cute. But then there's another scene where him and his friend, who's a much better actor, Brandon Quinton Adams.
Yeah, I've seen him in a few things, I'm sure.
He's also in The People Under the Stairs.
Right.
Actually. He's the lead in
that.
He was also in The Sandlot, but I think most people would know him probably from the Mighty Ducks movies.
Okay. Yeah.
He's the black kid in the Mighty Ducks movies is probably the best way to most people remember him. He's a good actor. I don't know if he still acts, but he was always good with the material he was given in these days. And in the few scenes he's so much better and more likable than this other kid.
Yeah, definitely.
But there's a scene where they basically pay this babysitter who's babysitting them as well to flash them.
Yeah.
And it's really gross.
It is very gross.
It's really gross. So
it doesn't need to be in the movie.
No, and it's not even. It's not even gross on that level where like, whoa, man, what were movies like back then? What were they even thinking? Like, it's just dumb and bad and gross.
Yep.
But
speaking of gross, man, microwave killing people. All right.
Yeah. So this one has, like we were saying, a lot of Final Destination kills.
Very much. Yeah.
Basically, the guy gets into a computer system and he's able to go through modems. This would have seemed absolutely insane in these days, but today, refrigerators do run on the internet, and microwaves. I don't know if there's microwaves with internet power. I know there's whole home AC systems and shit like that. But at the time, this doesn't make any sense. There was no microwave attached to the to the internet in those days. But
yeah,
it's kind of funny how
it becomes almost like. I'll touch upon it briefly, but the Pulse movie from 1988, a little bit like that. It's more of electrical thing that he's got. I don't know how he manages to, because there's no Bluetooth microwaves. I don't know how that works.
No. But it is really, that's probably the coolest scene in the whole movie, as he somehow manages to fry a guy by overloading a microwave so much that it just makes the entire room cook.
Yep.
And it's a pretty decent effect. Like it's not. This isn't a horror R-rated movie except for that scene. That scene is pretty darn nasty. At a time when movies were starting to be cracked down on a little bit by the MPAA.
Yeah, and then again you have some rather subpar kills, or at least like threats, like with the swimming pool cover. I'm just like, I know what's going to happen here. He's barely going to get out, and yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess that's computer controlled too, but I don't know. I'll go with it, I guess. But I think for me, it really just takes a huge nosedive in the end, where he becomes a series of, it's very much again like Lawnmower Man, where he like manifests himself into this blob of JPEGs, or I don't know how you would describe like the little things that, you could shoot him and he breaks apart and then he gets back together again. And, it's I guess it kind of wants to have like a Terminator like climax.
I was going to say Terminator 2 was definitely something they're trying to evoke. The kid is clearly supposed to be a young John Connor type. He even has little, the movie opens with him doing little scams, kind of like John Connor is introduced doing. It's funny because I picked this over Brain Scan, but Brain Scan actually has the kid who played John Connor.
Exactly.
But this one is like the more of the knockoff. And then Karen Allen is really like, she's like a professional version of Sarah Connor, who ends up protecting her kid. Though the dude does come in and kind of save them in the end, I suppose. Basically, they find a way to be able to shoot whatever this guy is. This ghost is like these electronic atoms in the atmosphere, and they can't attack him, but he can attack them. And for some reason, I think this takes place in Dayton, somewhere in Ohio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They have a full-on fucking large hydronic.
Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce it.
I know what you're saying. A thing that spins really fast to crush atoms.
Yes.
LHC, a collider.
Yes.
It's pronounced Large Hadron Collider, and I did a little bit of research, and there was a smaller particle accelerator collider in Fermilab, then that's in Illinois near Chicago. So there was actually particle accelerators in the Midwest, but I couldn't find any evidence of one being anywhere near Dayton, Ohio. What's funny is that they kill the guy by exposing that, and it's so magnetic that he can't like hold himself together, and then they can shoot him or some shit.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make any sense, but it's funny because that's the way they almost kill the lady Terminator in Terminator 3, is they stick her to one of those, and it starts to like remove all of her parts.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So it's just like, it was funny. They got ahead of Terminator on one thing. But for things that are good, we'll say the direction is fun. There's like shots that are just like going out of their way to be almost Sam Raimi like, which you can see in Tank Girl. Tank Girl's got some really cool crash zooms and fisheyes and weird angles and sped up. Like, she does all this cool music video stuff for Tank Girl.
Oh, for sure. And that's far superior and more fun.
Yeah. But so it looks good, and it has one really good kill. It's also really, like, as we were talking about how Death Spa is such a quintessential early 80s movie, this is such a quintessential early 90s movie. There are just all these little touches. The mom works for TWA, which is an airline that doesn't exist anymore.
Right. Mm-hmm.
The scene before the microwave kill, this guy opens up his freezer to have a line of basically what are lean cuisines, which was like the new thing that everybody had eaten. Like microwave dinners existed before the 90s, but in the early 90s, like my mom ate nothing but lean cuisines for a while.
Oh yeah, they're still out there. They're still
out there. I just had a Michelina's macaroni and cheese earlier today, and they have not changed those boxes since I was a child.
Holy cow.
But it was like a new thing. I mean, he has it set up like a bookcase. It's kind of a funny gag. People are buying clothes from catalogs because there is internet, but nobody used the internet for shopping yet. The babysitter is watching an episode of Living Color, the variety show that used to play on Sundays.
And the computer store is so painfully.
I mean,
90s.
the computer store has believable technology though. Like I've been in that computer store. That was what is it called? Oh shit, Babbage's.
Yes, Babbage's. Oh god.
That was just a Babbage's. Arcade and Death Spa have science fiction cartoon computer shit. It makes no sense. And the fact that a man gets trapped and becomes an evil entity in computers, that doesn't make sense. But the way the computers and laptops are presented in this movie, and the way they like give her this shitty thing to scan her
address book.
Her address book.
Yeah.
My friend's parents had one of those horrible scanners that you have to rub over your writing by hand. They never worked. It was amazing. We would try to get that thing to work for hours. It scanned weird and it could never read your handwriting anyway. But like they sell her this thing and it comes in a box, and the way it has like later on a character has like a guard dog thing to sign into the internet. It's a little animated guard dog, which reminds me of the animated paper clips and all that shit we used to have in the America Online days. There's a part where the SWAT team comes in and basically someone gets swatted. The evil entity tries to swat these people, which is something that wouldn't become normal for years, decades until after this. But he essentially sends the entire LA or the entire Dayton, I think it's Dayton, PD to this house and says there's dangerous people in there. And so they show up, and one of the it's either satire or really tone deaf. I don't know, because the cops come up and the cop in charge, like they're saying, I don't see anything here. And the cop in charge says, ever since LA, we don't sit around like sitting ducks anymore. Which they're referring to the LA riots had just happened the year before. So yeah, again, either satire or so fucking tone deaf, because then the cops just open fire on this house and they end up shooting what's her name? Walters, who plays Karen Allen's mom.
Yeah.
Even though they're only like 10 years apart in age.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. That I will say that like the creepy element early on is something that still, people struggle with today, and that's identity theft and like messing with your credit and the ATM thing. I was just like, oh yeah, well that's still an issue. People are still hacking in and messing with people's lives like that, and that's pretty scary.
And it was also, there's something like the parts where the hero guy who comes in the movie way too late to be an interesting character, they're actually tracing what's happening to her.
Oh my gosh! And the hero guy in this, he plays a major role in The Hidden. I was like, I know I've seen this guy before, but yes.
Oh, he's also in Twin Peaks,
right?
Which again, I'm rewatching right now.
Yeah.
He's the guy who comes out of jail.
Yeah, he's been in a lot of stuff actually. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's not bad, but he's like Karen Allen, he's really given nothing to do, and again, zero chemistry between the two of them. They're supposed to be interested in each other, and it's just there's nothing there. So there's good stuff going on here, but I wouldn't say it's a particularly good movie.
Definitely not, but you might enjoy certain sequences.
Better than arcade. Oh yeah, that's another thing, is that the arcade, there's a part where the kids go to an arcade and play virtual reality, in a very funny scene where their faces are on these very blocky VR guys. And you corrected me. I believe I thought that it was also called Dante's Inferno, that arcade, but I guess it's just Inferno.
Yeah, or Satan's Inferno. I can't.
Satan's Inferno. It's just so funny that they ended up in these two movies had almost the same name for their arcade.
Yeah, there's interesting connections here and there. I don't think there was any connection to early on. I mean, I just decided to go all in and watch any movie called Pulse. Not there's actually way more than the three that I watched, but Pulse from 1988. I think it's actually really well shot, and it has like those clever sort of like David Fincher-esque shots of like going into the machinery and seeing how like a TV could be infected, like blood cells and stuff. It's just they find some really clever ways to get inside the little atoms of things.
That's the one with a young Joey Lawrence.
Yes,
correct?
and Clifty Young, who keeps popping up in things that I watch. But yeah, I like that there's no real explanation other than it's just some weird supernatural force deciding to cause chaos in this suburban neighborhood. And I think Jay Ferguson's score is really good. And again, there's another creepy sequence involving someone getting trapped in their shower while, you know, the heater is on full blast, or, you know, the water heater is out of control. So she's basically getting burned alive and can't escape. So that sequence is very memorable. And again, there's just like these little setups involving electronics, but it gets, you know, kind of silly towards the end, as these movies tend to do. And again, the child acting by Joey Lawrence and his brother.
I can remember that.
Yeah, it leaves something to be desired. But I don't know. I still have a fondness for it just because I saw it at a very young age, and it definitely creeped me out at the time. But I wouldn't say it holds up, but it's still, again, one of those, a little bit like Ghost in the Machine, that I think is worth your time if you have nothing else to do and you just want to see some cool sequences well shot, you know?
When Patrick and I were talking about during the best horror movies thing, he picked the Child's Play reboot.
Oh yeah, I was going to bring that up as being really well done.
Yeah, and so we were talking about. I got to the point where I was saying that a lot of that movie was sort of an evil Alexa movie.
Yeah,
and it made me think. Again, I'm going to connect this. I really like the Final Destination movies.
Me too.
And I think that there's something to connect these ghostly technology movies to the Final Destination movies. What I remember from Pulse, it has some very Final Destination like kills, but definitely Ghost in the Machine has not just there's a part where a series of events happen to make a dishwasher overflow.
Yep.
And then get the water on the floor and then electrocute the babysitter, which really felt like something out of Final Destination.
Totally.
Where you always have these more and more elaborate Rube Goldberg like devices. So I think that's a lot of appeal to these specific movies we're talking about.
Yeah, Rachel Talalay should go ahead and reboot it. Because if there were 8 more Final Destination movies, I'd be happy. I would. I'd enjoy it.
The worst Final Destination movie is still pretty fun.
Yeah, totally.
and I don't know if she still works with New Line. I know New Line got absorbed by Warner Brothers. I don't even know what's what anymore. But you know, Final Destination was a New Line property, and in the for a while now. I guess the last one came out in 2010 or something like that.
Yeah, they're bound to reboot that at some point. I would hope so.
They gotta. So that will bring us to the one definitively good movie we're going to talk about.
For sure.
Which is Kiyoshi Kurosawa's Pulse, known as Kairo in Japanese.
意識、霊魂、何と呼んでもいいんだけど、それを受容できるエリアっていうのは残念ながら無限大ではなかった。インターネットって勝手に向こうから繋がっちゃうもんなの？でもいつか必ずいっぱいになる。そしたら魂は別のエリア、つまりこっちの世界へ進出してくるしか方法がない。
どうしてみんないなくなるんだろう。
つまり回路は開かれた。それ貸して。あれ。
This was released in 2001. And this is basically, there was, I'm sure most people know that the movie Ring, or Ringu, came out in 98 and was a huge hit all over the world. And so this very specific brand of Japanese horror movie that they started to just call J-horror was sort of born out of this. And there was a series of movies about, Ring is basically about a haunted video cassette.
Yep.
There was movies like One Missed Call about a haunted phone. It basically any object that could be haunted, and that was like one aspect of it. But then the look of Ring, Hideo Nakata, I believe, is the director of the Ring. Hideo Nakata, his visual sense became really overdone at a certain point. And for the most part, I saw a lot of these movies because I first started reviewing DVDs. One of the only companies that would send me anything was a company that was trying really hard to cash in on this slowly dying trend of Japanese and Korean ghost stories. So I've seen a lot of them, and most of them are not very good. But Pulse is the one that is actually better than Ring. I think Pulse is the best of its kind. That's the limb I'm willing to crawl out on. Is I think Pulse is the best of all these movies.
I'm glad you feel that way, because looking around on Letterboxd, a lot of the people I follow, I was really surprised that a lot of them were middle of the road or just found it too slow. And I'm like, I am completely 100% enveloped by this movie. Every time I watch it, I don't feel like I'm watching a movie. I feel like I'm in a trance.
Yes. And that's very Kiyoshi Kurosawa, who is not related to Akira Kurosawa. Kurosawa's thing was these tonally eerie, slow-moving thrillers and horror movies. That was sort of what he got out of this. And because he was existing before Ring became a hit, and he admits that he was absolutely trying to, him and the producers were trying to cash in on Ring with this, but adding his aesthetic to it changes it entirely and gives it a real thematic heft that I think is entirely missing from most of these post-Ring J.
I need to see more of his work, because I know this is considered like maybe the third, and I know they do this all the time and Patrick hates it, but they lump it into like a trilogy of like a thematic trilogy from the director. And I think Cure and Charisma might be the other ones.
Charisma, Cure, and also Seance, which is a pseudo remake of Seance on Wet Afternoon. Cure is really good.
Yeah, I need to see that one, because that seems to be the besides Pulse, the one that people seem to talk about a lot. But for me, really, like, great movies and great horror films are about the feelings they kind of generate in you, and it's not always about the plot. It's not always about the story. And this movie, to me, feels like it somehow taps into the feeling of depression better than any movie maybe ever.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I understand that people may not find that pleasurable, but I think this movie really captures that isolation, that loneliness, that fragility, and it's like for so long too. I mean, part of me was putting something like Melancholia as like a better example or a prime example, but when you see something like Pulse, it just creates this mood, and it's clear because this director has a confident artistic vision, and it creeps you out. It definitely creeps you out, and it definitely has scares, but they're not your traditional jump scares.
No, there's like no jump scares.
Right.
It's there's a couple moments where someone will turn around and see a ghostly shape.
Yeah.
Or someone will move out of the way and a ghostly shape will be there, but it's never greeted with like a sting cue, a bam sound. It's almost always left to disturb you in a way that you are absorbing it rather than being stabbed by it. I should explain that people haven't seen it. The basic concept is that there is a sort of website that this part's very confusing, but it's sort of a experiment that someone has been doing at the local college with their computer system, and it has sort of gained a sort of sentience in a way. And so there's this website that will pop up and ask people if they want to see a ghost, and that's very Ring-like. It's actually very One Missed Call-like.
Would you like to see a ghost?
Yeah, and but what happens is the people are basically then fall into a Great Depression, and are eventually they kill themselves and are absorbed into this sort of entity, and so the computer stuff, the programs, are actually human souls. And as the movie goes on, the absorption becomes more instantaneous.
Yeah.
As if it's sort of contagious depression in a way. And so what Jim's saying, and I've had problems with anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder. I've never personally had problems with depression, but I've loved people and lived with people who have problems with depression. And this movie also captures the horror, the just terror of watching someone fall into depression and knowing you can't do anything to help them.
Yeah.
That you're not capable or prepared, and that all you can do is try to support them, but that might not be enough. And so major characters in this movie are people who are surviving this sort of plague of depression, but watching everything else around them fall into it.
I know, you really become connected to these characters. Like, again, it slowly envelops you and it slowly taps into your subconscious in a way. For me, at least, it's like one of those movies I think about, and it seeps into my dreams sometimes, just like the feeling of it. But I really do care about all the characters that are involved and actually want them to end up okay. So there is an emotional investment throughout everything, which I think is really, really important, because like most of the time I can just say this is a really masterfully well shot film with incredible sound design. That's like it just like every little hint, because there are moments too where it'll just cut to silence, and that is just as effective. Like that choice,
Yeah, there's so little music in this movie, and what is music, it comes at interesting times. It really plays with typical conventions. The movie opens brilliantly with this sound that used to happen when you turn on your modem. There's this horrible screeching, and it turns into the sound of the ocean.
Yeah.
And just that audio cue alone puts this movie in a special echelon for
and it
me.
brings it full circle. That's where she kind of ends up.
Right. And the thing that I don't think is discussed about this movie is it's an apocalyptic movie. This is a sort of end of the world situation, which is really unusual for these. I keep using the term J-horror just because that's what they call them. It's really quite on. It's Japanese ghost stories, and Japanese ghost stories are traditionally the great ones, especially the ones from the late 50s and 60s, are about some sort of revenge or retribution, and so it's a very personal story. And either they get out of it. The protagonist gets out of the situation and survives, or they are trapped and they can't get out, but it's only affecting them. And this is a case where the world around them just deteriorates.
It starts disappearing. And this is a movie that you have to, again, emotionally prepare yourself if you're watching it here in 2020, because some people are disappearing for reasons that might involve a virus, and I don't know, like it's
sort of it's a computer virus that kills people is the way to
essentially.
Well, okay, here's one thing. Do you remember the not good M. Night Shyamalan movie where plants fart on people and they kill
and people
themselves?
commit suicide in that? And
this is like that if it was computers instead of plants and good.
Exactly.
But it's the idea that something can make you kill yourself, but it's not even in a spectacular way. Like what was that movie called? The Wind?
The Happening.
The Happening. The Happening tries to be spectacular about its deaths, which honestly, if it didn't do that, it would be an entirely impossible to watch.
I'll never forget the theater reaction to the tiger eating the guy in The Happening. Like, that's when you knew, okay, the intention was to creep people out and make you scared, but everybody in the theater is laughing at a kill.
My favorite thing about that movie is that after it started getting bad reviews, Shyamalan said it was intended to be funny, but managed to not tell the people who produced the DVD and Blu-ray, because I had to review that back in the day. And on the extras, there's this whole like 10-minute long featurette where he's talking about how this is the most disturbing thing he's ever made. And it was his first R-rated movie because he felt like he needed to go there. So clearly he was trying to be serious.
Of course.
Anyway, so that idea of contagious suicide, that actually comes up in other movies. Off the top of my head, I remember there's a movie called Autopsy, which is it's an Italian giallo thriller, but it has a sort of thing happening around it where there has been sunspots, and the sunspots have caused massive suicides across Italy, and that's sort of like a subplot happening around this murder mystery.
Yeah, this must have happened in other films that I've seen, and I just can't think of it off the top of my head, but
this just does such a good job of just the sorrow of it all.
Yeah, I get really sad. I really do watching this movie, and you know that the very final shot, not necessarily going to give it away, but it's just one of those things where it's bittersweet. I get, like the way she says about like, oh, I'm happy being here with my friend, and then what happens, and it's like,
yeah, it's a giving. The whole idea of giving in to death.
Yeah,
and giving in to, it's something that it's like the opposite of a zombie movie, where the absolute worst case scenario is to give in to becoming a zombie. There's a lot of movies that deal with death in a way that there's something going on, and you're just going to have to accept it. That is always sticks with me when movies do it right.
Yeah, and I mean, again, like this, you can watch this and think it's a little dated with the dial-up and all that, but the feeling that you get watching this just feels as fresh today as I think this is a timeless movie. Like, I think people will watch it 10, 20 years from now and still have the same reaction. But you mentioned Ringu, and it's like, I think of how when that got remade, that sort of became a phenomenon. Was just like, let's remake all the Japanese horror movies now. And boy, did they try with this one. They really tried, and they failed terribly. I mean, I have very little to say about it. It just looks terrible.
How many years were between this?
I think 5.
Yeah, it was almost too much time. This movie really needed to come out when it came out.
Yeah. But I mean, it has like that bluish or greenish hue for the entire time. It's just poorly lit. Like, he goes into a library at the beginning, and it's like, what library on earth is this dark? And you know how effective these shadowy ghosts are in the original Pulse. In the remake, let's turn them into Marilyn Manson twitchy creatures that are straight out of, like, again, the Ring remake or something. Like,
which we almost watched. Fear.com is full of that.
Yeah,
shit.
it's like
William Malone. Like that was his MO. I actually like it in what's it called? House on Haunted Hill does that.
Oh, sure.
It's like the one case where I quite enjoy that. It feels like William Malone made this, and he ended up making Fear.com, which has something in common, I suppose. But they're both trying to be The Ring, but with the internet.
Yeah, I mean the remake has Kristen Bell, and that's fine. I enjoy her, of course.
Yeah.
But they just ruined it. They totally bypassed all the dread and atmosphere and mood of the original for, again, it's like a Dimension movie that's like, oh, let's have some cheap jump scares and have these ghosts jump out and say boo at you, and that does not work at all.
Well, and some other thoughts on the original is what I was saying. Like, I was asking how many years were between it. This movie was technically made before 9/11. But there is a crashing airplane, and it was released after 9/11, so a lot of people read the crashing airplane into that, but it was just a way of showing that people have disappeared, and there's nobody to fly the plane, which, funny, I really do think, and this might be pushing it, but I really do think that the guys who made Avengers Infinity War had this at least a little bit in mind. Somebody in the special effects department had seen this, because the way that the heroes turn into dust and ash is so similar to this, except for in this case they leave behind sort of a moldy stain.
Right.
But they turn into a sort of an ash. And and then like the end of that movie, the post-credit thing has a helicopter fly into a building because the person flying the helicopter has disappeared. That's basically the same thing that happens in this movie on a much, much, much smaller budget.
Well, with the way they turn into ash, again, this kind of harkens back to our last episode on nuclear war movies, but I thought maybe that's like a Hiroshima kind of a commentary with the way they just, they sit there, or, they just dissolve, or they turn into a smudge of black on the wall.
Yes.
And it's just like their soul is gone, and it's just one of those sights that you see and it just really gets to you. And it's not even terrifying. It's just something that simple like ash,
Yes, but it is absolutely supposed to represent that. And actually, I found a pretty good quote from Kurosawa about the ending revolving around destruction of the city.
Mm-hmm.
And his quote is, "Cities are full of artificial stuff, so you feel that they might end up being destroyed someday. I probably feel this way because I'm Japanese. Cities in Japan, such as Tokyo, are destroyed roughly every 50 years. Most destruction happens through earthquakes, then war comes next. Tokyo has been sustained for the last 30 years, but it is constantly said that it's in danger and about to collapse. In the West, they build their cities with buildings that would last 100, 200 years. But in Japan, city may collapse within your lifetime. That's our preconceived idea that's imprinted on Japanese minds."
Wow.
He said this before they had the big earthquake that caused the nuclear meltdown.
Right.
This was an interview from just a little bit after that movie.
Good Lord.
Pulse had been released. So it is definitely in the league with movies like the original Godzilla, in that it is dealing with Japanese, a very specifically Japanese fear of cities being destroyed, basically.
Yeah, and I really like that the ghosts look like shadowy shapes, and like
they look like what happens after a huge explosion goes off and the person is obliterated.
Yes.
And they'll have those shadows left over.
Yeah, I know, that's just remarkable. I find that way more creepy and scary than, again, like just some creatures jumping out at you or your typical ghost-like figure.
Yeah, and like you said, there is the idea that there's this disease, and so watching this, because it's been a busy month, so I actually watched this and took notes a while ago. So we're at like still towards the beginning of this whole COVID-19 thing, and seeing these apocalyptically empty streets in this movie, which is a really big deal to the characters because they're in the middle of Tokyo and there's no one on the street, which is just insane. Well, in the real world, there was no one on the street in Tokyo probably at the time. I don't know. I guess I don't know if Tokyo shut down as much as some other countries, but just these normally crowded streets being blank had a extra bit of scariness to it.
Yeah, walking downtown Chicago still isn't quite the same. There's still things that are boarded up because of riots. A lot of businesses are still not able to open because of the virus. So
yeah.
it does feel like walking through a ghost town, even though technically we're reopened. I don't know. It doesn't feel like it yet, but it's just a weird time.
It probably shouldn't be.
Yeah.
As I've said on the other podcast, I'm immunocompromised, so my year's pretty much over. But I still think things are starting a little bit too quick.
See, I'm trying to be like somewhat optimistic that like, oh yeah, the Music Box of Horrors, I have that to look forward to, don't I? Please, something like that I would normally do every year has to still happen. But man, like all film festivals, they're like going online, and it's in theaters or closing down. So I don't know.
Personally, living in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, I would love the Music Box of Horrors to go online this year, so I could still.
If that happens, I won't.
Still be there.
I mean, it'll be sad, but I'll accept it, and certainly
we'll have to all watch it together
with
with our computers like open to Google Hangouts or whatever. One more thought on this. Well, actually, I have a couple more thoughts, but this really is a good representation of this period in the internet and where it was going. And there's there's glitchiness that is inherent in the era where a computer glitch would look more like static on a TV, whereas in something like Unfriended 2, you have these glitches that are these stretches. I don't know what you call this particular glitch, but it's something where the image will like sort of ghost itself.
Sure. I think I know what you mean.
And so and then on top of that, there was an era. I know that there are still urban legends about the evils of the dark web in this day and age, but I believe that's really more about the corrupting influence of that kind of stuff. Whereas when this movie was released, there was actual public fear about haunted websites. I remember that being a thing when I was a teenager. Like, you don't go to this website, it's haunted. And I don't really think of stuff like Slender Man and Momo are really more about, the scariness about them is that they make kids do bad things. Yeah. It's not that the website itself that they saw, the image they saw, is going to get them. So I think that's another thing that makes this movie, like, yeah, you said they made it, even if they would have done a decent job with the American remake, it almost would have already felt out of date by then.
Yeah, and it even plays that way for sure.
At the same time where you say it's timeless in its themes and its imagery, it does have this very specific period to it that I think in the end is a plus, because it is the way the internet felt back then.
And it still can feel that way. Like, people, will say, like, yeah, I mean, I'm able to build all these amazing online communities, and I'm forever grateful for the internet because, podcasting, and a lot of reasons really for us to be happy and, realize that we're not alone. But at the same time, it's not an in-person human connection where we're looking at each other in the eyes and all that stuff. So I think a lot of people still struggle with going fully digital or, considering themselves as like being a part of social media, because it's not the real deal. And you can still feel isolated and lonely because technically you are, but.
Right. Well, and this movie's really prescient in that way because it predates smartphones, and smartphones are really the moment when I think the idea of being absorbed into the internet became part of culture, and you had to tell people to put their phones down. At this time, it was still a ritual to get on the internet. You still had to dial up the modem. You had to sign in to your provider. There wasn't a fear of people being absorbed by the internet, and yet in this movie, people are literally absorbed by the internet. There's also this zombie-like behavior after they start to fall into their internet.
They're totally depressed and non-functional.
Yeah, which is this sort of loneliness of social media. It's all these cultural touchstones that exist now that were being touched on here that were, if they were intended, would have been secondary because it would have been forward-looking. And I want to give Kurosawa the credit to be that forward-looking, but I don't think that he was intending this to be a warning against too much phone time or anything like that. But it works on that level.
Yeah, and it does in a lot of levels. It's certainly, man, it's just one of those movies that I think, for better or worse, it's not going to leave my mind. And I'm grateful that horror films, because I mean I often say, like, even something like Unfriended or some of the horror movies that we've discussed when we talked about great horror films of the decade, I don't think have reached this level of completely scaring me, but again, not in the traditional sense of jumping out and scaring you, but just getting inside of you in some way and not I mean, to some degree, I still have nightmares about Freddy Krueger. So, that I think that can work and has worked, especially early on when you're an impressionable age. But for like the adult in me, the sophisticated movie watcher, I think Pulse is one of the all-time great horror films now for me. The more I watch it, I feel that way. But I can't say I've watched as much Japanese horror. I was interested in maybe the Dark Water movie because I actually liked the remake with Jennifer Connelly. I thought it was okay.
Yeah, they're both on about the same level, I would say. I think that is a Hideo Nakata movie, and he visually, the Ringu guy, is visually one of the most impressive, and there's a reason why his style caught on.
Sure.
Well, the Grudge movies aren't my favorite. Yeah. Marabito, I think is how it's pronounced, is a very interesting one by the same guy who did the Grudge movies.
Okay.
I actually really like One Missed Call is Takashi Miike's unabashed ripoff of Ring, but it's very entertaining. It's well done because he knows, Miike knows how to make entertaining.
Oh yeah, movies. For sure. I mean, the remake's terrible, but yeah.
Yeah, no, the remake is actually maybe the worst of those remakes. I don't know. It's a long road to the bottom, but I honestly don't know if anything other than Ring comes to mind as being really good of any of those American remakes.
Yeah.
I mean, The Dark Waters is okay, but a lot of that's because Connolly's good.
Yeah, you got Connolly and John C. Reilly in there, so that's they're good. They carry it, but yeah, I remember being pretty good, but not great. So
the Grudge remakes are sort of interchangeable because they were made by the same guy. At least some of them were. But yeah, I mean, I would say if people like this kind of movie, that one Missed Call is worth.
Yeah, I'll check that one out finally. I mean,
yeah, it's more fun time. Not it's not going to make you think like Pulse does.
Yeah, I actually think two better recent examples of a techno horror film are Cam, which I actually wanted to watch again.
Yeah.
Because I
haven't seen
it. Definitely worked on me, and of course it has some social commentary surrounding the world of webcam modeling and sex work. So I think that's worth seeing for sure. And then you mentioned the Child's Play remake. I think that was really well done, and nothing at all like the original, which was kind of nice for a change.
Yeah.
And if you want to go balls to the wall, do yourself a favor and just go ahead and find yourself some Tetsu the Iron Man. And watch that before you go to bed. Woohoo!
Which I think we're gonna have to eventually, either you and me or me and someone else is gonna have to just do a cyberpunk thing.
Oh my gosh!
I'm gonna end up having to
oh boy, that's a fun journey too. I'd be up for that. I part of me kind of wants to go the more fun route and do some body switching movies next.
In other podcasts, Patrick and I talked about Evil Speak on our 1981 slasher podcast. Which is about an evil computer. It's really not a slasher movie, is what we came to. And yeah, we talk about both Unfriended and Unfriended 2 on our best of the 2010s and Child's Play. So, there's a lot of movies on the list, which I will include in the description. But they mostly looked really awful to me, so I didn't really want to watch them.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anybody knows, is Death Tube good? Probably not.
Homewrecker. I want to see Homewrecker.
E-Demon good? Probably not. Well, Homewrecker's old enough that it's probably at least entertaining.
Yeah.
Dreamhouse is another one I've heard is pretty fun, which is from the 90s. And I suppose Existenz. I've never thought of it as top tier David Cronenberg, but it's still a pretty interesting movie.
Oh, it's a lot of fun. For a Cronenberg movie, it's fun.
It ended up getting really overshadowed by The Matrix.
Oh,
it came out around the same time. It had similar ideas. I remember people in college saying this weird Canadian ripoff of The Matrix. I'm like, hey,
that's Cronenberg, man. Don't say that.
So, this Evil Computers is always going to be pretty fun, but unfortunately, there's not that many.
Well, it was a true honor to be back on your great show here, and rumor has it that you'll be returning the favor in October for a Directors Club episode on Lucio Fulci.
Yes, that is the plan. I believe that Patrick still has plans to do one of the Friday the 13th with me too.
Oh yeah, that should be fun.
That will depend on if things reopen enough in Chicago that he ends up back at work, I believe.
True. Yeah, very true. We'll see how that works out for him. I hope it does.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, part of me really wants to do that with him, but another part of me wants him to have steady income. So.
Indeed.
I guess I should stop thinking about my own needs. Thank again. You. Where can they find you?
DirectorsClubPodcast.com and, of course, NowPlayingNetwork.net. And I'm over on Letterboxd at NowPlayingJim if you want to see me rate movies. I don't write nearly as many reviews as Patrick does, but maybe I will again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, someday.
Someday.
You can reach me at the Genre Grinder website, genregrinder.com, the Genre Grinder Facebook, at Genre Grinder on Twitter, or at Gabe M, as in Matthew Powers, on Twitter. Until next time, social distance, wear a mask outside. Thank you from me to you. Black Lives Matter, and
stay safe.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye.
Nothing left but a burnt spot on the floor. The evidence was clear, this was no accident. Killer crew